Hello and welcome to another edition of the Florida Chamber's Bottom Line. I'm Edie Owsley, Vice President of Public Affairs at the Florida Chamber, and joining me today are Tia Mitchell. She is the State House Bureau Chief with the Florida Times-Union, and Gary Fineout, who is a Capitol Press Corps reporter with Associated Press. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks. Thank you for having us.
We are at the halfway point of the 2015 legislative session, and we've seen a number of issues that have become high-profile subjects, water, health care, even prisons, gambling. As you take a step back and look at the issues that lawmakers have been debating, what is your assessment at the midpoint of session?
My assessment is we haven't really done very much. And there's a big divide in a lot of places, particularly in the healthcare arena and on the budget. And frankly, as anyone who's watched this process knows, the budget is sort of the grease that gets the gears to turn. And as long as there's a big sort of conundrum with the budget, it kind of affects the progress of the session. And essentially, we're here at the midway point, and they've only passed, really, both sides have only passed one substantial bill. And everything else is, there's some bills that have passed both chambers in different forms, and they've got to work it out. But overall, there's a lot that has not yet been done.
So Tia, Gary was just talking about the chasm, the differences between the two budgets. How dug in do you think that lawmakers are?
Well, if you believe what they say, which is, you have to couch that because, again, this is a little bit of posturing, but I do kind of believe what they say, mainly because the House has said for 3 years straight that they do not want to use federal dollars to expand Medicaid. So you can believe that they really don't want to do it, and they're dug into that. And so far, there has been no compelling reason from the Senate to make them change their mind. But what's different this year is the Senate says it's really dug in. And before, the Senate would say, hey, we want to expand Medicaid, we did it on our side, they wouldn't do it on the other side, and just shrugged it off. This year, the Senate's saying, no, we think it needs to be done, it's our highest priority, and that's really different this year. So Gary, do you see a special session in the future, or extended session?
I see someone is going to have to have a fairly major retreat in order for things to be worked out. And that's not, it's not that that's not possible between now and the end of the end of the session, but it just doesn't seem like that's where we're going. I mean, the situation is basically when you have a top person in the House, which is the Budget Chairman, Richard Corcoran, when you have him get up on the floor and give a passionate speech defending their position, saying that one chamber cannot dictate to another chamber, that kind of affects the pace and the way things will go into the future.
Well, let's switch gears for a couple of minutes. One of the top priorities for the Florida Chamber is water, securing Florida's water future. With that in mind, we have seen lawmakers address the issue. They've been focusing on not only Florida's water needs, but the reality of voters voting in Amendment 1. So Tia, tell us a little bit from your perspective and your vantage point, how do you see the water debate progressing?
I think the water debate, the policy is progressing pretty well. They are working on implementing Amendment 1. I see two things happening. I think the environmentalists that pushed Amendment 1 are going to not be happy at the end of the day because they want much more money spent on purchasing conservation land, and the Amendment 1 dollars are going to be spread out for various kind of water issues, various water projects that don't all fit under what the Amendment 1 supporters really wanted. And if you read the language of the amendment, you could almost make anything qualify for Amendment 1 projects that have to do with water. They say it should be land buying, but the legislators are saying, hey, wait a minute, we get to make the rules and we're going to use the money for what we want to use it on. The actual projects are going to be part of the budget debate, and so we don't know yet exactly what they're going to use Amendment 1 dollars, the specific projects, but I think there's going to be a lot more variety than perhaps what some of the conservation groups would like.
We've We've already talked a little bit about the budget and how healthcare has been a leading part of that debate. But if we focus specifically on healthcare, we know that while both chambers have distinctly different opinions on the overall issue, especially when it comes to expansion, there does seem to be middle ground with telemedicine and scope of practice, which would be allowing nurse practitioners and physician assistants to practice to their fullest capability. So, Gary, tell me how you see the healthcare debate, not only just the overall issue, but specifically telemedicine and scope of practice moving forward.
I think we can all agree. I mean, I think the House has already expressed a thought that they want to do something about access to care. It would not surprise me if the House, as a result of all of this, pushes ahead with several of those issues, especially the scope of practice and nurse practitioner bill. I think that they might want to try to package them all as, this is our answer to how to deal with health care. And we don't think that we need to do what you've offered in terms of the Medicaid alternative expansion plan that the Senate has crafted. Instead, we think you should do these other things to improve access. And we've heard a little bit about that. We've heard about the graduate medical education, increasing the number of doctors and things of that nature. So I wouldn't be surprised if that becomes part of the mix before all of this is said and done. And I think that, as you know, again, Richard Corcoran, the budget chief for the House, has made it abundantly clear that we need to, quote, challenge the status quo. And so I can see all of that becoming part of the dynamic and the dialogue between now and the end of session.
Let's switch gears now over to gambling. We know that the Seminole Compact, that is going to expire at the end of July. And there is a House bill that would propose a massive expansion of gambling. Gary, I think that you've been covering this issue for a number of years, and you've been there certainly this year. What are your thoughts? Will the Seminole Compact be expanded? Will the House pass an expansion bill?
I think at this point in time, the main outcome that I could foresee, possibly, and I still don't even know if this is guaranteed, is something that just simply allows the status quo to continue as is. I think the Senate has showed that it is potentially interested in that dynamic. In other words, passing something that merely says that the existing compact kind of stays in place for a little while longer. Is it a year? Is it 2 years? I don't know the answer to that. But I think you've seen the Senate warming up to that. So what does that mean for the House bill? Well, I mean, the House bill still hasn't even passed one committee yet. And it was kind of interesting. We had a sort of conversation with the Senate president, and the conversation was, well, the House is waiting to see what the Senate is going to do. And the Senate President Gardner's response is, well, doesn't the House need to pass a bill through a committee first? You know, we're waiting to see what they're going to do. So I think at this point in time, it's kind of hard to imagine that we would have a major gambling bill get passed this year. But that doesn't mean I don't think that something still can't happen between now and May 1st.
I just think the House's gambling bill, people just thought it was dead on arrival because there's just so much in it. So there's so much for people to hate. You know, you got the Greyhound industry doesn't like decoupling, that's in the bill. You have Disney and the Restaurant and Lodging Association don't want destination resorts, that's in the bill. You know, you have the Seminole Indians don't want the compact to go away, that's in the bill. So there's so much opposition to that House proposal because it's so heavy, it's just kind of sinking under its own weight.
Well, Tia and Gary, thank you so much for joining us today. And to our viewers, thank you for joining us on another edition of The Bottom Line.